Barony was originally programmed in C, not C++. I was really fond of the C language at the time. I really liked how simple it was. And frankly, I didn't really understand C++ that well either. I had spent most of my teenage years teaching myself these skills like how to make a raycaster, how to make a level editor, how to program everything that I need to program in C. So I wasn't using any tools. I just used a text editor. I believe the compiler I was using at the time was MinGW, which is it's a port of the GNU compiler suite to Windows. Other than, C compiler, text editor, I wrote all the tools. The driving principle behind Barony was stand it up really, really quickly. I had this little tile editor that I had made for a previous game prototype, and I was like, okay, well, we're gonna use that to make the levels. And the next thing, once we had made some really simple mazes, was okay, we need, a 3D renderer. So I just threw together like a little Wolfenstein raycaster in like a day. So you could wander around, a maze in 3D. Over the next week, my brother and I threw some 3D models together, some voxel models for character and a monster, a rat, and various items and equipment, potions, that sort of thing. And over the following week, I got to the point that you could run around and open doors, and I could take some screenshots, and we had like a really basic lighting engine in there, so we could kind of imagine the game before we really had any gameplay. I would say that the point where the game really started to resemble a game was after the first couple of months. At that point, we had our level generator in there, and I was working on the multiplayer, so I managed to get a few computers talking to each other, and my brother and I and sister were running around this randomly generated level, and that was pretty cool. I then spent, a month working on being able to pick up items and have lots and lots of different items, and then, a couple months after that, I had rats roaming around. So at that point, I understood, okay, this game is actually congealing really fast, and this was the first big project that I had ever worked on, certainly the project that I had worked on the longest in my life. So I knew that it was going somewhere, and I felt really, really confident that I could finish the game on my own.
I really identified that the first major problem with the game in terms of its art direction was the disunity between the pixel art and the voxel art and the resolution. So the world texture art was 16 by 16 per tile, whereas the voxel resolution was 32 by 32 by 32 cubic voxels. And so immediately we have a dissonance in the potential for detail in the world. I wasn't certain that the right thing to do was going to be to match those precisely. I thought maybe the right thing to do would be to have higher resolution world textures. And so I actually experimented with creating 256 by 256, like nice high resolution textures that were still sort of stylized. But I found that really flattened out the world. You could, the extra detail in the textures just sort of drew attention to how flat the environment is. So I pulled back and took more of a pixel art style. And I'm talking like classic PC first person game pixel art like Doom and Daggerfall, what you'd play in a classic early 90s first-person action or RPG game. So yeah, it was in the mines. I made some new textures to replace those. And then I believe in order to make sure that was going to match up well with the voxel art, I did dive into redoing some of the voxel art. All of the software that we were using to develop the game was free, and I believe they were using 2 different voxel editing tools to make the voxel art for Barony at that time. And they were using one of them to create the models and another one to texture them. The pipeline was really odd, and it was really difficult to work with both of those programs. So at that time, I took it as like my personal mission to find an art pipeline that was a lot more conducive to my workflow, that would help me focus on iterating and making the art better rather than fighting with the tools. That's when I tracked down Black Flux's Voxel Shop, which is a voxel editing tool. And I actually reached out to the creator of that program, and it's open source. It's all up on GitHub. It was either able to, or I worked directly with the creator of Voxel Shop to get an export option that exported into the same voxel format that Barony was using. So that was a huge success. It took this multi-step process using bad tools for voxel art into one that was much more conducive to high quality art production. That's when I started redoing the models. My first delivery was a batch of textures and models after I had solidified that pipeline so that the rest of the team could see the results of my work and how that it was going to change the art direction to have the world art and the models look different.